Welcome to the Daily Bible Reader Podcast. I am your host, Rakia Collins, and the mission of this podcast is to read the Bible from beginning to end every single year, starting in 2024. If that mission sounds interesting to you, I'd encourage you to grab your Bible and read along with me. On today's episode, we are going to be picking up with Genesis 48 and going all the way until Genesis 50. Genesis chapter 48. Jacob blesses Ephraim and Manasseh. After this, Joseph was told, "Behold, your father is ill." So he took with him his two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. And it was told to Jacob, "Your son Joseph has come to you." Then Israel summoned his strength and sat up in bed. And Jacob said, God Almighty appeared to me at Luz in the land of Canaan and blessed me, and said to me, Behold, I will make you fruitful and multiply you, and I will make of you a company of peoples, and will give this land to your offspring after you are an everlasting possession. And now your two sons, who were born to you in the land of Egypt, before I came to you in Egypt, are mine. Ephraim and Manasseh shall be mine, as Reuben and Simeon are. And the children that you fathered after them shall be yours. They shall be called by the name of their brothers in their inheritance. As for me, when I came from Padan, to my sorrow, Rachel died in the land of Canaan. On the way, when there was still some distance to go to Ephraim, and I buried her there on the way to Ephraim, that is, Bethlehem. When Israel saw Joseph's sons, he said, Who are these? Joseph said to his father, They are my sons, whom God has given me here. And he said, Bring them to me, please, that I may bless them. Now the eyes of Israel were dim with age, so that he could not see. So Joseph brought them near him, and he kissed them and embraced them. And Israel said to Joseph, I never expected to see your face, and behold, God has let me see your offspring also. Then Joseph removed them from his knees, and he bowed himself with his face to the earth. And Joseph took them both, Ephraim in his right hand, towards Israel's left hand, and Manasseh in his left hand, towards Israel's right hand, and brought them near him. And Israel stretched out his hand and laid it on the head of Ephraim, who was the younger, and his left hand on the head of Manasseh, crossing his hands, for Manasseh was the firstborn. Then he blessed Joseph and said, The God before whom my fathers Abraham and Isaac walked, the God who has been my shepherd all my life long to this day, the angel who has redeemed me from all evil, bless the boys, and in them let my name be carried on in the name of my fathers, Abraham and Isaac, and let them grow into a multitude in the midst of the earth. When Joseph saw that his father laid his right hand on the head of Ephraim, it displeased him, and he took his father's hand to move it from Ephraim's head to Manasseh's head. And Joseph said to his father, Not this way, my father. Since this one is the firstborn, put your right hand on his head. But his father refused and said, I know, my son, I know. He shall become a people, and he also shall be great. Nevertheless, this younger brother shall be greater than he, and his offspring shall become a multitude of nations. He blessed them that day, saying, By you, Israel, will pronounce blessings, saying, God make you as Ephraim and as Manasseh. Thus he put Ephraim before Manasseh. Then Israel said to Joseph, Behold, I am about to die, but God will be with you and will bring you again to the land of your fathers. Moreover, I have given to you, rather than to your brothers, one mountain slope that I took from the hand of the Amorites with my sword and with my bow. So, verse 11, we see that Israel said to Joseph, I never expected to see your face, and behold, God has let me see your offspring also. What I love about this is that it shows that God will do exceedingly abundantly above all that we will possibly ask or think of him. And to think that Israel genuinely, in his experience, as he said, went from thinking for decades that his son Joseph was dead, and now he gets to see Joseph's kids. It's just mind blowing the way that God orchestrates our lives and the events and circumstances that we go through ultimately for us to receive blessings that we didn't even know that we needed or that we didn't even know were possible. And the last item from chapter 46 that I thought was very cool was this last couple of verses from Israel, where he says to Joseph in verse 21, then Israel said to Joseph, behold, I am about to die, but God will be with you and will bring you again to the land of your fathers. Verse 22, moreover, I have given you, rather than your brothers, one mountain slope that I took from the hand of the Amorites with my sword and with my bow. What I love about this is that he ends off his conversation with blessing his grandsons with a promise to Joseph that, as we saw at the beginning of the introduction to Joseph's life when Joseph had the robe of many colors that his brother didn't have. Even to this day, we see that Joseph is still getting favor because he's getting a whole mountain. He's getting a mountain that his brothers are not getting. And we also see the promise that Israel is communicating to Joseph that this is what God is going to do. He is going to bring us up out of this land. And that's all of my commentary for chapter 48. So we can move forward into chapter 49. So, chapter 49, Jacob blesses his sons. Then Jacob called his sons and said, gather yourselves together, that I may tell you what shall happen to you in days to come. Assemble and listen, O sons of Jacob. Listen to Israel your father. Reuben, you are my firstborn, my might, and the firstfruits of my strength, preeminent in dignity and preeminent in power. Unstable as water, you shall not have preeminence, because you went up to your father's bed, then you defiled it. He went up to my couch. Simeon and Levi are brothers. Weapons of violence are their swords. Let my soul not come into their counsel. O my glory, be not joined in their company. For in their anger they killed men, and in their fullness they hamstrung oxen. Cursed be their anger, for it is fierce, and their wrath, for it is cruel. I will divide in Jacob and scatter them in Israel. Judah, your brothers shall praise you. Your hand shall be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's son shall bow down before you. Judah is a lion's cub. From the prey, my son, you have gone up. He stooped down. He crouched as a lion and as a lioness. Who dares rouse him? The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff between his feet, until tribute comes to him, and to him shall be the obedience of the peoples, binding his foal to the vine and his donkey's colt to the choice vine. He has washed his garments in wine and his vesture in the blood of grapes. His eyes are darker than wine and his teeth whiter than milk. Zebulun shall dwell at the shore of the sea. He shall become a haven of ships, and his borders shall be at Sidon. Issachar is a strong donkey, crouching between the sheepfolds. He saw that a resting place was good, and that the land was pleasant. So he bowed his shoulder to bear, and became a servant at forced labor. Dan shall judge his people as one of the tribes of Israel. Then shall be a serpent in the way, a viper by the path. He bites the horse's heels so that his rider falls backwards. I wait for your salvation, O Lord. Raiders shall raid Gad, but he shall raid at their heels. Asher's food shall be rich, and he shall yield royal delicacies. Naphtali is a doe, let loose that bears beautiful fawns. Joseph is a fruitful bow by a spring. His branches run over the wall. The archers bitterly attacked him, shot at him, and harassed him severely. Yet his bow remained unmoved. His arms were made agile by the hands of the mighty one of Jacob. From there is the shepherd, the stone of Israel. By the God of your father who will help you, by the Almighty who will bless you, the blessings of heaven above, the blessings of the deep that crouches beneath, blessings of the breast and of the womb. The blessings of your father are mighty beyond the blessings of my parents, up to the bounties of the everlasting hills. May they be on the head of Joseph and on the brow of him who was set apart from his brothers. Benjamin is a ravenous wolf, in the morning devouring the prey, and at evening dividing the spoil. Jacob's death and burial. All these are the 12 tribes of Israel. This is what their father said to them as he blessed them, blessing each with each blessing suitable to him. Then he commanded them and said to him, I am to be gathered to my people. Bury me with my fathers in the cave that is in the field of Ephraim the Hittite, in the cave that is in the field of Machpelah, to the east of Mamre, in the land of Canaan, which Abraham bought with the field from Ephraim the Hittite to possess as a burying place. There they buried Abraham and Sarah his wife. There they buried Isaac and Rebekah his wife. And there I buried Leah. The field and the cave that is in it were bought from the Hittites. When Jacob finished commanding his sons, he drew up his feet into the bed and breathed his last. There are a few things in chapter 49 that I want to touch on. The first being just the first piece of the chapter where we see that Israel is giving his sons their blessings, and he is giving each of the blessings to them based on what they deserve, as we saw that he states in this chapter. I want to not go through all of them, but just a couple of them that really stood out to me. The first one, of course, we see in verse 3 and 4, where he's talking about his son Reuben. And so he begins by just saying, look, Reuben, you are my firstborn. You show my might and my first fruits of my strength. You are preeminent in dignity, preeminent in power. But in verse 4, we see that he talks about how Reuben is unstable and how he went up to his father's bed and defiled it. And if we remember back in Genesis 35, Reuben was that son who slept with Bilhah, and Bilhah was one of Jacob's wives. And so that's why we see him calling his son unstable and that he shall not have any preeminence because of the lack of respect for boundaries that Reuben showed. And then the next set of sons, Simeon and Levi, where he talks about them being weapons of violence for their swords. And what I found so interesting is that in verse 6, he says, let not my soul come into their counsel. O glory, be not joined in their company, for in their anger they killed men, and in their willingness they hamstrung oxen. And if we remember these pair of brothers, back in Genesis 34, when their sister Dinah was defiled, they ended up asking that group of people to circumcise themselves, and they went up and they killed all of them. And as we see here in Jacob's blessing, he is asking that his soul not come into counsel with that. And I think that is interesting. While we all know what happened to Dinah was not okay, it was inappropriate, it was terrible, we see that Jacob has the wisdom to say that the weapons of violence are their swords, and let not my soul come into their counsel. I think that is just riveting. And the last one that I want to point out is, of course, going to be Joseph. While the Bible never explicitly tells us that Joseph and Jacob and the brothers had a conversation about what they did to Joseph, by this blessing and the words that Jacob uses to bless Joseph, you can tell that he knows what they did to Joseph. He says, Joseph is a fruitful bow by a spring. His branches run over the wall. The archers bitterly attacked him, shot at him, and harassed him severely. Yet his bow remained unmoved. His arms were made agile by the hands of the mighty one of Jacob. So we know that Jacob knows what his sons did to Joseph just from reading those few verses, even though the Bible doesn't explicitly give us insight into that conversation. And of course, the last thing that I want to talk about is, unfortunately, the death of Jacob. And it's always tough for me. And let me know, guys, whether it's on social media or wherever, just let me know how you guys feel when you read about the characters in the Bible and you learn and you glean so much from them, from their life's experiences, from their experiences with God, and then they die. Of course, it's the reality of us all, but I just think about Jacob, how he came on the scene with his brother. I think about the tricks that he performed with his mother to get Isaac to give him the blessing. I think about how he tricked Esau with the bowl of soup to give him the birthright. I think about how Jacob fled and he went to Laban and the situation with Laban. Like, we literally got to see Jacob from birth throughout his life. And of course, we know he had to die at some point. We all have to, but it's just sad to know that portion of the story is coming to an end, but there's always going to be something that comes behind it that continues on the story and will continue to allow us to thread through the lives of the characters in the Bible while seeing God's goodness and the role that God will play in all of this and ultimately bring forth the Messiah, Jesus. That's all of my commentary for chapter 49, and we can proceed into chapter 50. Chapter 50 of Genesis. Then Joseph fell on his father's face and wept over him and kissed him. And Joseph commanded his servants, the physicians, to embalm his father. So the physicians embalmed Israel. 40 days were required for it, for that is how many days are required for embalming. And the Egyptians wept for him 70 days. And when the days of weeping were past, Joseph spoke to the household of Pharaoh, saying, If I have found favor in your eyes, please speak in the ears of Pharaoh, saying, My father made me swear, saying, I am about to die. In my tomb that I hewed out for myself in the land of Canaan, there shall you bury me. Now therefore, let me please go up and bury my father, then I will return. And Pharaoh answered, Go up and bury your father, as he made you swear. So Joseph went up to bury his father. With him went all the servants of Pharaoh, the elders of his household, and all the elders of the land of Egypt, as well as all the household of Joseph, his brothers, and his father's household. Now, only their children, their flocks, and their herds were left in the land of Goshen. And there went up with him both chariots and horsemen. It was a very great company. When they came to the threshing floor of Atad, which is beyond the Jordan, they lamented there with a very great and grievous lamentation. And he made a mourning for his father 7 days. When the inhabitants of the land the Canaanites, saw the mourning of the threshing floor of Atad, they said, "This is a grievous mourning by the Egyptians." Therefore, the place was named Abel Mizraim. It is beyond the Jordan. Thus his sons did for him as he had commanded them. For his sons carried him to the land of Canaan and buried him in the cave of the field at Machpelah, to the east of Mamre, which Abraham bought with the field from Ephraim the Hittite to possess as a burying place. After he buried his father, Joseph returned to Egypt and his brothers and all who had gone up with him to bury his father. God's good purposes. When Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, "It might be that Joseph will hate us and pay us back for all the evil we did to him." They sent a message to Joseph saying, "Your father gave us this command before he died. Say to Joseph, 'Please forgive the transgression of your brothers and their sin, because they did evil to you. And now, please forgive the transgression of your servants, of the God of your father.'" Joseph wept when they spoke to him. His brothers also came and fell down before him and said, "Behold, we are your servants." But Joseph said to them, "Do not fear, for am I in the place of God? As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people shall be kept alive as they are today. So do not fear, I will provide for you and your little ones." Thus he comforted them and spoke kindly to them. The death of Joseph. So Joseph remained in Egypt, he and his father's house. Joseph lived 110 years. And Joseph saw Ephraim's children to the third generation. The children also of Machir, the son of Manasseh, were counted as Joseph's own. And Joseph said to his brothers, "I am about to die, but God will visit you and bring you up out of this land to the land that he swore to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob." Then Joseph made the sons of Israel swear, saying, "God will surely visit you, and you shall carry up my bones from here." So Joseph died, being 110 years old. They embalmed him, and he was put in a coffin in Egypt. Chapter 50. It is a very hard hitter, I'll say, because you can see that we are transitioning from the current characters that we know that have been the main characters, and we're shifting into something new. This is also the final chapter of Genesis before we get into the next book of Exodus. And so you can tell that we're rounding out the stories of the main characters that we've known up until this point. So, starting from the beginning of chapter 50, one of the first things that I want to call out is going to be in verse 3, where it talks about the embalming took 40 days, but particularly that the Egyptians wept for 70 days. It's very interesting to me that the Egyptians wept. But when I think about it, Israel lived in the land of Goshen. At this point, we know that Israel lived there in that land for the latter half of his life. He's essentially a pillar of the community. He's not just, "Oh, this is Joseph's father. Let's just be sad with Joseph because Joseph is sad and let's go on about our way." We can see that this death also impacted the Egyptians. They were in mourning for 70 days. You couldn't play that. You couldn't fake that. He was a major part of the community. And it just really speaks to the relationship that Jacob had with the Egyptians at that point for them to want to join in the mourning process for 70 days. The next thing I want to go into is going to be in verse 11. When the inhabitants of the land, the Canaanites, saw the mourning on the threshing floor of Atad, they said, "This is a grievous mourning by the Egyptians." Again, just another call out that this wasn't something they were mourning because, oh, this is Joseph's father. Let's just be sad with Joseph. The community genuinely felt this loss when Jacob died. And of course, the last thing that I want to call out is going to be his brothers and how they are, they're still up to their old ways. I don't know if Israel or Jacob actually said this, but I'll just start with verse 16 and we can get into the commentary. Verse 16. So they sent a message to Joseph saying, "Our father gave us this command before he died. Say to Joseph, please forgive the transgressions of your brothers and their sin because they did evil to you." Between that and between the way verse 15 is written, where they say it might be that Joseph will hate us and pay us back for all the evil we did to them, it seems like as we read verse 16, they're just trying to put words in a dead man's mouth because they don't want to lose what they have been given up until this point in their lives by Joseph, because they feel like he's only doing this because we have the same dad. And now that our dad is gone, he's probably going to throw us to the wolves. He's probably going to kick us out or stop showing favor to us. But I love Joseph's response. Joseph said, first of all, before Joseph said anything, Joseph wept when they spoke to him. He just started crying when they spoke these words to him. I don't know how soon this conversation happened after Israel died, but I can only imagine it's a mix of him being sad that they would think that's in his character, him being sad that they're mentioning their father who recently passed. Like, I'm sure it's just a mix of emotions as to why the first thing Joseph does is begin to cry when they speak to him. But I love what he says in verse 19. He says, "Do not fear, for am I in the place of God?" That's the first question that he asked them. Am I in the place of God as to why you guys are giving me this much power to be able to believe that I, within myself, would just throw you away, would just toss you to the wolves? He says, "As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive. So do not fear," verse 21. "I will provide for you and for your little ones." For me, it is important that from hearing and just knowing Joseph's story up until this point, that within myself, I constantly remind myself, and hopefully it's a reminder to all of us as well, that just because you have the power to do evil to someone that did you wrong doesn't give you the right to do. It doesn't give you the right to pay back wrong for wrong, to go tit for tat with someone. Although, admittedly, as humans, in the moment, it may feel good. We're not after our feelings or after right standing and right positioning with our Father. And we can see that if Joseph, after all that he went through with his brothers, if he can sit here and have this type of attitude about his experiences with them, there's no reason why we should feel like we could not do the same. And then lastly, of course, we get into the death of Joseph. The Bible lets us know that Joseph lived in the land of Egypt for 110 years. But I love the way that Joseph ends his life by this statement. Essentially, he says to his brothers, he says, "God will surely visit you, and you shall carry up my bones from here." Essentially, the same thing that we see Jacob stated to Joseph when he went and brought Ephraim and brought Manasseh, and he was blessing his sons. When Jacob said to them that God is going to come and he's going to take you guys up out of here, Joseph is essentially saying that same message to his brothers, God is going to come and visit you here. And when he comes, make sure y'all don't leave me. Take my bones with you. I need to be with my people. When you guys leave, I need to leave with you. And so that's how we see this chapter ending. And not only this chapter, we see this book ending. There was so much that we learned from Adam and Eve and the serpent and the incident in the garden up until where we are. We have Abraham, we have Noah, we have the flood. Like, we have so much goodness in this chapter that really begins to lay the foundation as we turn and get into Exodus. So stay tuned, guys, for tomorrow when we dive into Exodus chapter 1. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. I hope you found some value out of this content. If you did, please leave me a rating or a review wherever you are listening. This would mean the absolute world to me, and I'd love to hear from you on social media. Please feel free to reach out on Twitter at His Eternal Word, the number 1, and please feel free to visit the website at www.thedailybiblereader.com. And I hope you stay tuned for the next episode.